Chapter 28, Mischievous Child. The man's words ignited the elderly woman's anger like a powder keg. She immediately stood up and pointed at the middle-aged man across from her, launching into a furious tirade. "What's the matter? Am I bothering you because I'm old? Have I become a nuisance to you, so much that I can't even say a few words to my daughter-in-law? Your father passed away early, and I single-handedly raised you and your sister. Now that your sister has achieved something, you're fed up with me, is that it? Do you all wish I were dead, just to have some peace and quiet?" The elderly woman rambled on, firing off like a machine gun, incessantly complaining and lamenting. The man's impatience gradually waned, eventually turning into helplessness and sighs, prompting him to change the subject. "It's not like that, Mom. Speaking so loudly will disturb others." The woman hurriedly handed over a glass of water and humbly said, "Mom, please sit down and calm down. Yaozong didn't mean it that way." However, the elderly woman pushed the woman aside, directing all her anger towards her. With a sharp tongue, she retorted, "It's all your fault. Ever since you married into the family, I haven't had a single good day. Are you purposely trying to challenge me?" The woman was full of grievances, knowing she had become the outlet for the elderly woman's frustrations. Looking at her silent husband, and thinking about having to rely on her powerful elder sister when they arrived in the provincial city, the woman could only silently endure, bearing the brunt of her mother-in-law's wrath. Zhang Ran and his companions watched the whole process like spectators, but nobody intervened. This was a family matter, and outsiders had no place interfering. Each member of this family had their issues, and there wasn't a single normal person among them. The elderly woman both feared and depended on her son, afraid that her daughter-in-law would steal her son's attention, and constantly highlighted her own sacrifices to make her son feel guilty and obedient. She also relentlessly oppressed her daughter-in-law to secure her position in the family. The son, burdened by filial piety, also relied on his mother's support to gain advantages over his sister, leading him to burden his wife with his mother's anger. Without her husband's support, the wife had to endure her mother-in-law's mistreatment alone. Her children seemed indifferent to her plight, leaving her with no choice but to compromise to avoid being kicked out of the house and left with no support. As for the young child, in the face of his father and grandmother's quarrels and his mother's unjust treatment, he only watched the scene gleefully, scorning his mother and looking down on his father, instinctively relying on his grandmother to gain a higher status. Zhang Ran clearly understood this complex family drama. It was devoid of genuine affection, everything was driven by considerations of personal gain. Yu Zioan shook her head and whispered to Guan Song, "We're fortunate our family isn't so complicated. It's really vexing." Guan Song nodded in agreement, "Absolutely." The two brothers, Ji Qingcheng, were dumbfounded. This was the first time they had witnessed such a scene in real life, resembling a television drama. They were both amazed and grateful. Ji Qinglan muttered quietly, "Brother, we're really lucky to have been born to Mom." Observing the family across from them drowning in negative emotions, Ji Qingcheng nodded. Such a family was terrifying. Even the most outstanding individuals could be worn down by such an environment, either becoming a part of it or suffering from mental breakdowns. The shop regained its quiet atmosphere. Zhang Ran and his companions tacitly decided not to provoke the family further. When the child had demanded the sweet potato crisps earlier, they had already put them away. However, it seemed the child was not satisfied. Faced with the delicious sweet potato crisps that Zhang Ran's group was enjoying, he began to throw a tantrum. "Grandma! Grandma, Mom hit me!" As the child cried out to his grandmother, indicating that his mother had hit him, the elderly woman marched over in anger and scooped the child into her arms. Glaring at the woman, she began to reproach her. What's going on? Are you venting your resentment on the child? As long as I'm alive, don't even think about harming my grandson. For the first time, the woman stood up to her mother-in-law, arguing loudly, Mom, how could you say that I hit him because he misbehaved, not out of resentment? Your indulgence will spoil him. You always protect him when he makes mistakes at school. How can he receive proper discipline? Having her authority challenged, the elderly woman erupted in anger. You can't control the child properly, and now you're blaming me. Since you can't handle it, let me take care of it. From now on, I'll be responsible for how, and you should stay out of it. Fine, I won't interfere. Frustrated, the woman sat down next to her husband. The child looked at his grandmother, still not forgetting his demand, Grandma, I want to eat sweet potato crisps. I want to eat sweet potato crisps. Hastily comforting the child, the elderly woman said, My dear grandson, don't worry, Grandma will figure something out. At that moment, Zhang Ran's group suddenly realized that the situation might involve them. They quickly averted their gaze, quietly continuing to eat their snacks. When the child had clamored for sweet potato crisps earlier, they had already put them away. The elderly woman looked at Zhang Ran's group, her smile warm and friendly as she said, Young lady, young man, our child really wants some. Could you spare a bit for us? Don't worry. When we reach the safe zone in the provincial city, my daughter will repay you double. Who knows, she might even arrange a good place for you. Zhang Ran's group. Was this an attempt to get something for nothing? It was okay to share, but such an entitled request seemed excessive, didn't it? Not to mention whether her daughter was really in a high position in the provincial city. Even if they reached the safe zone, finding her was not guaranteed. This promise seemed overly extravagant. However, since the other party was smiling, Zhang Ran didn't want to appear cold. She smiled back and replied, Auntie, I'm really sorry, but we've already finished our sweet potato crisps.